So let's begin with our usual invocation.
Miss, can I suggest a setting?
Can you what?
Can I suggest something that will make your screen look a little better, like a full screen?
Sure.
So, Miss, when you, no, same thing when you were presenting, you just click enable editing, and then there's on the right side this option for slideshow.
One sec, huh?
Yeah.
I don't have, is it large now?
No, Miss. So, Miss, first, it's protected view. So, you enable editing.
Okay, one sec.
Right under help, yeah.
I know, but it's getting covered. That enable editing.
Miss,
This is large enough. It's good enough, Vijal.
Okay, okay.
Yeah? Chalo. Let's get started. Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satya Jnana Satya Jnana Jyoti Paravinda Jyoti Paravinda. So today we'll continue from where we left off last class. We talked about Purusha and Prakriti, and we started our class by talking about being in touch with that in us, which is outside pain. We started with that quote we said, which said that we all go through pain, but we go through pain with gritted teeth because we are not in touch with that part of us which is always outside the pain. So let's just continue with that. So this passage is about transcending pain. How can I transcend the pain that difficult events in my life cause? The answer is the painful event from the past never happened to me. Now, how can I make that statement that the painful event from the past never happened to me? Let's look. If all is the mother, both the person who caused me pain and I do not exist, except as illusions in our mind, superimposed on the reality that the mother is. An illusion cannot be hurt because it doesn't exist. To see this experientially is to transcend the hurt. A thought in Buddhism is Thought happens, but there's none who thinks. Speech happens, but there's none who speaks. All experience happens, but there is none to experience it. The witness is aware of the experiences, but cannot experience them. In this lies the redemption and transcendence of all painful experiences. They happen, but it is Prakriti happening to Prakriti. The I who hurts from them does not exist. Prakriti happening to Prakriti. This is an interesting phrase. We'll look at it a little later. The I who hurts from them does not exist, and in truth cannot hurt. In the movie Matrix, when Neo sees the bullets do not exist, they cannot hurt him anymore. If I constantly remember that I do not exist, only the mother does, then life experiences cannot hurt me anymore. So let's understand this a little better. So what this is saying is that I hurt because I feel I exist here as a person. But Vedanta tells us trenchantly again and again that no person really exists here. That if everything is the God realm, the realm of Mother, the person is an illusion I'm superimposing. Like in Vedanta, they called it Adhyaropya. The rope is the Mother, the realm of God. And the snake is the sense of I superimposed on the rope. The rope is dangling, but I think that there's a snake superimposed on that dangling rope. So that's where I suffer because I feel experiences are happening to me. But in truth, I exist only as a mental construct to myself. So they cannot happen to me. It's Prakriti happening to Prakriti. See, I am made up of two things, the witness, the awareness in which everything happens, and the play of emotions, thoughts, etc., which is Prakriti. So whatever's happening in the play of Prakriti is Prakriti happening to Prakriti. It's not really happening to me. So let's just understand that and read this passage one more time. How can I transcend the pain that difficult events in my life cause? The answer is the painful event from the past never happened to me. If all is the mother, both the person who caused me pain and I do not exist, except as illusions in our mind, superimposed on the reality that the mother is. An illusion cannot be hurt because it doesn't exist. It's like if I get stabbed in a dream, the dream I got stabbed, the real me wasn't stabbed. And the dream I can't actually in reality be stabbed because it's a dream. To see this experientially is to transcend the hurt. A thought in Buddhism is thought happens, but there's none who thinks. Speech happens, but there's none who speaks. All experience happens, but there's none to experience it. The witness is aware of the experiences, but cannot experience them. The witness can't experience them. He can observe them. In this lies the redemption and transcendence of all painful experiences. They happen, but it is Prakriti happening to Prakriti. The I who hurts from them does not exist and in truth cannot be hurt. We've seen the movie Matrix, where the agents are throwing bullets at Neo, and when he's fully convinced that the bullets do not exist, they can't touch his skin, they stop. In the Matrix, when Neo sees the bullets do not exist, they cannot hurt him anymore. If I constantly remember that I do not exist, only the mother does, then life experiences cannot hurt me anymore. Any questions before we go ahead? Is this clear? Okay, then let's go ahead.
Ma'am, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes.
Can you explain Prakriti happens to Prakriti a little more?
Yeah. So, in the realm of Prakriti, suppose you, Purvi, tell me, Anahita, I dislike you. So, the Purvi telling Anahita, I dislike you, is in the realm of Prakriti. Now, Anahita hurting because Purvi tells me that is also in the realm of Prakriti. So, I think the hurting Anahita is happening to me, but the hurt is happening in Prakriti to Prakriti, because I, as a separate person, don't exist for it to happen to me. Clear?
All right. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Ma'am, this is Anjan here.
Yes.
Can I ask a question here?
Yes.
So, can we say that in Vedantic language, where we say that we are not this body-mind complex?
Yeah. Yeah, Anjan, I'm listening. I think his net must be fluctuating.
No, I'm sorry. So this body-mind complex, which is called, very popularly called in Vedanta, that is also part of Prakriti.
Yeah, yes, yes.
So in that sense, can we say that the hurt is being felt by the mind, and the body, if it's a physical pain, it is experienced by the body?
And both are in Prakriti.
And both are in Prakriti. So
Yes.
as long as I identify with the Prakriti, I will be hurt. If I identify my I with Prakriti, with my body or with my mind.
Yes, but the you who's hurt doesn't exist. As an ontological fact, you don't exist as a person. But as a dream fact, you exist. Remember last class in Savitri, we read that beautifully coined term by Sri Aurobindo, dream fact, vision of reality. So you exist as a dream fact, not an ontological fact. And that dream fact you will hurt.
So
Can't hear you, Anjan.
the entire process is to realize that we are not the Prakriti.
The entire process is to actually experience that which you are beyond Prakriti. Knowing it theoretically is nice, it's not useless, but the most important part of it is if you can experience it in your moment to moment living. So let's go ahead. So suppose this poem is called Other Arms Await You. Suppose, like I gave that example, Purvi tells me I dislike you. So scalding words hurled, roaring flames of anger, hungry to devour and negate. Sometimes in our interactions, we may feel the anger of a so-called person is hungry to devour and negate. For a moment, the fall into the abyss of inadequacy. For a moment, when we are criticized, we feel, am I really so bad? Then a memory stirs, a wordless voice reminds, hurt not, if the arms of this fickle world withdraw. The world's arms are always going to be fickle. The same person who's so good to you today, who knows tomorrow he'll be different. Hurt not if the arms of this fickle world withdraw. Other arms await you. Unseen arms of love that never judge. Arms that are awaiting just one turn of attention away. Where are these arms? Anyone? Which are these other arms that await us when the arms of the fickle world withdraw? Anyone? So what holds you when you're hurt? Does something hold you or do you fall to pieces?
Our faith in the mother, our faith in God.
Faith, yes. But also, where is that faith? That faith is actually the fabric of the Purusha that you are. Remember, I don't know if we did it, Gita has a shloka, Shraddha Mayoham Purusha. The very fabric of the Purusha is faith. Why can the Purusha just witness? Because its very fabric is Kalyan Shraddha, the knowing that everything is perfectly controlled and it can just therefore witness. This Purusha could be part of the mother inside you, your psychic being, but a dimension of yourself beyond body, mind, and emotions is the other arms. So those other arms are parts of you which you're not aware of. Hurt not if the arms of this fickle world withdraw. Other arms await you. Unseen arms of love that never judge. Arms that are waiting just one turn of attention away. And Bijal has put this beautiful picture of the mother putting her arm around that little girl. Unseen arms of love that never judge. Arms that are awaiting just one turn of attention away. So when we are boiling and stewing, he said this, how could he do this? We are paying attention to that. We have no attention left to pay to the mother or the witness inside us or to another dimension. But those arms are always waiting just one turn of attention away. Pulled into the refuge of those arms, wholeness is restored. A wholeness that unflinched confronts the snarls with a transcendence that knows itself to be beyond their reach, beyond the reach of the snarls. So when we fall into those arms inside us, we become whole again. And we find the transcendence that just knows that I'm something which the snarls can't reach. I'm beyond their reach. I'm beyond the reach of the hurt and the criticism and the wounds that anyone can inflict on me. And smiles at the dream identity, the snarls target. Dream identity is the dream fact I, the ego I. The snarls, the angry person, is targeting the anger at a dream identity, but I'm not that identity anyway. What I am can't be targeted because it's not seen by the person who's angry at me. And smiles at the dream identity, the snarls target, and laughs with abandon in the security of the emptiness that is its heart. Emptiness here is not like a sad emptiness, it's the shunyata of the Buddha, where the Buddha says that all manifestation is empty of an individual separate self. So he says, you think you're full of a you, but you're empty of the you. He, of course, doesn't say, but Sri Aurobindo says you're empty of you, but you're full of the mother, full of the divine. Okay? So scalding words hurled, roaring flames of anger, hungry to devour and negate, for a moment, the fall into the abyss of inadequacy. Then a memory stirs, a wordless voice reminds. This is a voice inside you which reminds you. Hurt not if the arms of this fickle world withdraw. Other arms await you, unseen arms of love that never judge. Arms that are awaiting just one turn of attention away. Pulled into the refuge of those arms, wholeness is restored. A wholeness that unflinched confronts the snarls with a transcendence that knows itself to be beyond their reach and smiles at the dream identity the snarls target and laughs with abandon in the security of the emptiness that is its heart. Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is from Savitri. It held, it is consciousness, consciousness of a person who has broken the identification with Prakriti and is poised in the Purusha. It held as if a shield before its face, a consciousness that saw without a seer. The truth where knowledge is not, nor knower, nor known. The love enamored of its own delight, in which the lover is not, nor the beloved. So a consciousness that saw without a seer. Seeing happens, but there's nobody to see, as the Buddha said. There's sensing, but there's no person who senses. The truth where knowledge is not, nor knower, nor known. The love enamored of its own delight, in which the lover is not, nor the beloved. So there is an experience of love, but there's no person who's a lover, no person who's a beloved. In that realm, love becomes a field of oneness. As Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri elsewhere, all love is a yearning of the one for the one, in which the lover is not, nor the beloved, bringing their personal passion into the vast. The force omnipotent in quietude, the bliss that none can ever hope to taste. You can't taste it just the way honey can't taste itself and water can't feel wetness. When you become that, you can't taste it. The bliss that none can ever hope to taste. It cancels the convincing cheat of self. The dream fact I, the ego I, is the cheat of self. It cheats us into believing that it exists. So when that consciousness arises in us, which separates out from Prakriti, the convincing cheat of self is cancelled. A truth in nothingness is its mighty clue. Nothingness here is the emptiness, what the Buddha called shunyata. It knows that all form is empty of a permanent, unchanging self. So a truth in nothingness was its mighty clue. It held as if a shield before its face, a consciousness that saw without a seer, a truth where knowledge is not, nor knower, nor known, The love enamored of its own delight, in which the lover is not, nor the beloved, bringing their personal passion into the vast, the force omnipotent in quietude, the bliss that none can ever hope to taste. It cancelled the convincing cheat of self, a truth in nothingness was its mighty clue. Okay, so here he beautifully summarizes what we've been discussing. Now, the question is, knowing all this is nice, but how does it really help us if we can't experience it? So, it's very useful to make our little efforts towards trying to experience it. So, we'll do a little meditation based on the next screen share. I won't even call it meditation, it's more a thought experiment, a mind experiment. So, these are beautiful words by Swami Nisargadatta Maharaj. It has nothing to do with effort. Just turn away, look between thoughts rather than at the thoughts. When you happen to walk in a crowd, you do not fight every person you meet. You just find your way between. Very logical, no? If you're finding your way on a busy street through a crowd, you won't push people to find your way. You'll find gaps between people and go through those gaps. Now, if you look at your mind as a crowded street where instead of persons there are thoughts, it's futile to fight the thoughts if they are troubling you and stopping you from going ahead. It's more sensible to look for the gaps in the thoughts or that substrate piece which is behind the thoughts. When you fight, you invite a fight. But when you do not resist, you meet no resistance. When you refuse to play the game, you are out of it. When you refuse to play the game your thoughts are constantly pulling you into by witnessing them, you are out of the thoughts. I'm going to read this again. Pay attention to it. We'll be basing our thought experiment on it. It has nothing to do with effort. Just turn away. Look between the thoughts rather than at the thoughts. When you happen to walk in a crowd, you do not fight every person you meet. You just find your way between. When you fight, you invite a fight. But when you do not resist, you meet no resistance. When you refuse to play the game, you are out of it. So now just shut your eyes. Sit straight, sit tall. Let's begin by watching our breath in the nostrils. Just watch the air as it enters your nostrils. Watch the air as you breathe out. Just feel the touch of air in your nostrils on the in-breath, the touch of air in your nostrils on the out-breath. And for a minute or so, just pay attention to this. Now, become aware of the thoughts running through your mind. As the thoughts come and go, first be convinced that in this moment, there is a part of you outside thoughts, untouched by thoughts. And with that aspiration to find that substrate, this is the God hiding behind what you think you are. The substrate piece is the God realm. There's a beautiful Hindi song, an old song. Zara samne to aaja chaliye, O one who's treating me, come in front of me. Chup chup ke chalne mein kya baat hai? Why are you always hiding? Tu chup na sakega Paramatma. You won't be able to hide from me, my God. मेरी आत्मा की ये आवाज है. I'll look for you and I'll find you behind this veil of my thoughts, which you only created. So have that aspiration in your heart to find that substrate piece behind thoughts, between thoughts. Something very subtle, not obvious and in your face, but just 1 minute more look for it. Or even if you can't sense it, something in you deeply knows that it exists. So whenever I'm hurting a lot, just the remembrance that there is a part of me right now which cannot be touched by the hurt. And that part of me is more truly who I am than this hurting self in the storm of the hurt. And then slowly open your eyes. I'll pause here. Any comments, any questions, anything to share? Okay, then we'll go ahead. So this is Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo'S. Behind this petty instrumental action of human will, there is something vast, powerful, and eternal that oversees the trend of the inclination and presses on the turn of the will. So I feel I'm a person, and if I take that example of Purvi telling me I dislike you, I feel Purvi out of ill will in her is telling me that she dislikes me. But this petty instrumental action of the human will, behind it, there is something vast, powerful, and eternal that oversees the trend of the inclination and presses on the turn of the will. There is a total truth in nature greater than our individual choice. So there is a total truth in nature bigger than individual choice. It's the whole that acts through Purvi, making her tell me I dislike you. It's the whole acting through me that feels hurt about it. And this is total truth. or even beyond and behind it, there is something that determines all results. Its presence and secret knowledge keep up steadily in the process of nature, a dynamic, almost automatic perception of the right relations, the varying of persistent necessities, the inevitable steps of the movement. There is a secret divine will, eternal and infinite, omniscient, all-knowing and omnipotent, all-powerful, that expresses itself in the universality and each particular of all these apparently temporal and finite, inconscient or half-conscient things. This is the power of presence meant by the Gita when it speaks of the Lord within the heart of all existences, who turns all creatures as if mounted on a machine by the illusion of nature. So if I remember that it's not Purvi who told me she dislikes me, but the whole is the Adi Shakti, the mother, who spoke through her for her play. And her play, remember, we read a beautiful passage in Savitri last time, which says that it's all her play, but the play has a deep evolutionary intention at its heart. So it's not for nothing. So if I really remember that, maybe I'll be able to smile at Purvi telling me I dislike you. The moment I think it's Purvi's personal ill will, she wants to hurt me, I start hurting. But if I universalize Purvi even in my thought as a realm of mother, as a realm of God, then I can laugh at it, or at least not be so hurt by it. Laughing at it comes later, but at least I can be more neutral to it to start with. And in Savitri, there's again that beautiful line, which we've done many times, about the secret will mentioned here, whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes, only for the good the secret will can work. And here it says, there is a secret divine will, eternal and infinite, omniscient and omnipotent, that expresses itself in the universality and in each particular is each Nam Roop Gun, each person, each being of all these apparently temporal, temporary and finite, inconscient, they could be non-living things also, or half-conscient things. This is the power of presence meant by the Gita when it speaks of the Lord within the heart of all existences, who turns all creatures as if mounted on a machine by the illusion of nature. This divine will is not an alien power or presence. It's not a will outside us that we should fear or we should propitiate to get on our side. It is intimate to us, and we ourselves are part of it. For it is our own highest self that possesses and supports it. So this will is the will of the highest self of us, where we become one with God. Ramakrishna says it beautifully, the completely purified mind of a human being is God. So at our deepest and our purest essence, we are God. For it is our own highest self that possesses and supports it. It is not our conscious mental will. It rejects, it's not the will of our thinking mind. It's the will of that in us which is beyond the mind. And that will rejects often enough what our conscious will accepts, what our mental will accepts, that will reject it and accepts what our conscious will rejects. So if there's pain coming to us, our mental will say it should go away. But this deeper part in us will rejoice because it will foresee the growth that is coming from the pain. For while this secret one knows all and every hole and each detail, our surface mind only knows a little part of things. I often give you this example. The secret one can see the whole jigsaw puzzle. He can see the whole scenery arising. But our surface mind can only see one piece of a jigsaw puzzle, see it as a blur of colors and say it's senseless. Why is it like that? It's ugly. But if it's put in its place, it's not ugly. It's part of a beautiful scenery. Our will is conscious in the mind, and what it knows by the thought only. The divine will is super conscious to us. The divine will is part of our superconscient, that part of us which has frequencies much higher than thought, because it is in its essence supramental, above the mind. And it knows all because it is all. Our highest self, which possesses and supports this universal power, is not our ego self, not our personal nature. It is something transcendent and universal, of which these small things are only foam and flowing surface. If we surrender our conscious will and allow it to be made one with the will of the eternal, then and then only shall we attain a true freedom. If we give up our conscious will and make it one with the will of the eternal, now, how do we do it? We can't do it without silencing our mind. Because when the mind is silent and there's no thought coming up with, I want it this way, I want it that way, then automatically action happens through us. The guidance comes to us from that part of us which is bigger than thought. Living in the divine liberty, we shall no longer cling to the shackled so-called free will. We think we have free will, but actually in the realm of the mind, we have no free will because every thought we think we are choosing to think is programmed by all our past. It's a conditioned mind pattern. So there's nothing free in it. We shall no longer cling to the shackled so-called free will, a puppet freedom, ignorant, illusory, relative, bound to the error of its own inadequate vital motives and mental figures. What then are the lines of Karma Yoga laid down by the Gita? Its key principle, its spiritual method can be summed up as the union of two largest and highest states or powers of consciousness, equality and oneness. The kernel of this method is unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as our inner spirit, inner self and spirit. So Gita says to do any action, you need a foundation of two things, samatha, equality, and oneness. And the kernel, the seed of its method, how do you cultivate this equality and oneness? An unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as our inner self and spirit. So if I have to have an unreserved acceptance that the divine is my inner self and spirit, to that extent, I have to have a total rejection of being the ego self, the desire soul that Sri Aurobindo talks about. Right now, I am in total acceptance of the fact that I'm the ego me. No matter how many satsangs you attend, that hypnosis is so strong, it cannot leave you until your experience makes it go. Hearing things will help, it will sow seeds, but till you see it for yourself, that hypnosis will remain. So, so the kernel of this method is an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. An inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality. If every time the sense of I pushes me, oh, I should look good, oh, I should be thought of favorably by so and so who I have a special feeling for. But every time you look at that I and let it go and say that this is not me in the first place. So why am I serving a master which is an illusion? Let me serve the master which is real, which is the divine. Right now I'm serving my ego as my master. And Sri Aurobindo's whole thrust is that we have to exile and disinherit the outward looking ego and install the divine in its place. But it must be a oneness in a dynamic force, and not only in static peace or inactive beatitude. So we shouldn't feel this only in our meditation time. In the battlefield of life, in all action, this must be our living realization. That is why perhaps the Gita was given to Arjuna on a battlefield. It wasn't given in a forest, where sages used to give teachings to their disciple. It wasn't given in a temple. It was given on a battlefield, the Kurukshetra of life. That's where we have to have this poise. If we accept subjection of our whole being to that which is higher than the separating and limiting ego, it proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity, anchored in the Purusha, guided by its wisdom, not by the wisdom of the thinking mind. We do all the activities of the world. A largest possible action, irrevocably based on an immobile calm, is its secret. Free expression out of a supreme inward silence. All things here are the one and indivisible, eternal, transcendent, and cosmic Brahma. Brahma is the one reality that makes up everything. So all things here are the one and indivisible, eternal, transcendent, and cosmic Brahma that is in its seeming, in its appearance, divided in things and creatures. In seeming only, in appearance only, it seems to be this way. For in truth, it is always one and equal in all things and creatures. And the division is only a phenomenon of the surface. The division between I and not me, I and other, is only on the surface. Behind that surface, everything is, as said in Savitri, the million-bodied one. As long as we live in the ignorant seeming, we are the ego and are subject to the modes of nature, the gunas of nature, enslaved to appearances, bound to dualities of rag and dvesh, I like, I don't like, fortunate, unfortunate, tossed between good and evil, sin and virtue, grief and joy, pain and pleasure, good fortune and ill fortune, success and failure. These are all the dualities which we are bound to when we live in the ego. We follow helplessly the iron or guilt and iron round of the wheel of Maya. At best, we have only the poor relative freedom, which by us is ignorantly called free will. I want my free will to do what I want, but that is not free will, because you won't get what you want very often. And then when you don't get what you want, if you're not free to still be happy, how are you free? The real freedom is when the circumstances of life don't have the power to make us happy or self. When I am that beautiful word in Vedanta, Swayambhu, self-generated, a womb to myself, when my happiness comes from the fabric of my being, it's not dependent on fulfillment of desires or they not being fulfilled. And Sri Aurobindo writes about this beautifully in Synthesis, that when I disinherit desire and draw my happiness from the self-existent bliss of spiritual living, that's when I'm really free. At best, we have only the poor relative freedom, which by us is ignorantly called free will. But that is at bottom illusory, since it's the modes of nature that express themselves through our personal will. It's the force of nature grasping us, ungrasped by us, that determines what we shall will and how we shall will it. Nature, not an independent ego, chooses what object we will seek. It's Prakriti which is constantly wanting this, not wanting that, feeling happy if this happens, feeling sad if that happens. So it is nature, not an independent ego, chooses what object we shall seek by reasoned will or unreflecting impulse at any moment of our existence. If, on the contrary, we live in the unifying reality of Brahma, then we go beyond the ego and overstep nature. But then we go back to our true self and become the spirit. In the spirit, we are above the impulsion of nature, superior to her modes and forces. So if we live in Prakriti, identified with it, we'll constantly be tossed to happiness and sorrow depending on circumstances. But if we live in the unifying reality of Brahma, oneness, then we go beyond the ego and overstep nature. So then we get back to our true self and become the spirit. In the spirit, we are above the impulsion, the compulsions of nature, superior to her modes and forces, attaining to a perfect equality in the soul, mind, and heart. We realize our true self of oneness, one with all beings, one too with that which expresses itself in them and in all that we see and experience. This equality and this oneness are the indispensable twin foundation we must lay down for a divine being, a divine consciousness, a divine action. Not one with all, we are not spiritual, not divine. If we don't feel this oneness with all, in that moment we are not spiritual, not divine. We are the imperfect human self, not equal souled to all things, happenings, and creatures. We cannot see spiritually, we cannot know divinely, cannot feel divinely towards others. So this is both ways. If we don't have samta in us, then we'll always like some people more, some people less. I want to spend time with her, not with her. And then I'm not seeing spiritually. I'm getting caught up in Maya, seeing all things as different again. But when I see spiritually and I see everything as mother, then I'm more equal towards all being. Then I know things divinely and I feel divinely towards others. So if we go back to the earlier passage of Synthesis of Yoga, it talks about equality and oneness, which is the foundation of Karma Yoga in Gita. Equality is the constant vision that everything is God. Now, sometimes we have to work at it through our thought. If I don't like being in the presence of someone, then just the thought that this is also Mother, this is also God, it may just soften us towards the person. And if I'm getting very attached to the person, I'm hankering for more time, more attention from that person, and I just see that this is also Mother, not more special or less special than other manifestations of her, then I can really live that beautiful line of Rudyard Kipling in if all men count with you, but none too much. Everyone matters to you, but nobody matters too much and nobody is hated too much. It's difficult, but just because it's difficult, it's not that we shouldn't attempt it. So equality towards all, and the equality comes when we keep a constant drashya of oneness. That constant feeling of this also is Mother, this is also myself. Let me treat this person as I would treat Mother, as I would treat myself. And so beautiful our ancient India was. Even now, if you go to ashrams, they will greet any guest who comes as Ao Narayan, come Narayan, as if, I mean, I don't know if they feel it or it's mechanical, but even if it's mechanical, it's so beautiful to actually tell anyone who comes to your house as come Krishna, come Mother, come Narayan. Maybe we can't say it loud, we'll sound pretty crazy, but at least in our mind we can say it. Whenever we say hello, good morning to anyone, in our mind can we say good morning, Mother, hello, Mother, bye, Mother. I mean, these are little things, but the more you remember this, the more the change comes into your life. And then if you go into life with this feeling of everything is Mother, then whatever her play doesn't frazzle you. And that sense will somehow weaken the ego sense in you also, because ego thrives on separation, thrives on inequality. But the more equality and samta you bring into your thinking vision also, the more the ego goes to the background. And in your day-to-day living, see, remember, your ego is your desire to be seen, to be showcased, to be highlighted. It's not something bad. It's just a dysfunction which is there in all of us by virtue of being human beings. But whenever the ego comes in front, the self retreats. So whenever I'm compelled by the ego to do something to showcase myself, to highlight myself, to be seen as better than somebody else, if I have the consciousness, let me hold back that action. And hold back that action, why? By reminding myself that if I let my ego come forward, myself will retreat. I will get a lesser treasure, but I'll be losing a far greater treasure. Whereas every time I little bit say no to my ego, the self comes forward more. Because both can't coexist. When I'm entangled in the ego, the self retreats. It's there, it's what I am, but its perception retreats. When I'm poised in the self, the ego diminishes. So whenever the ego is acting jealous, possessive, clingy, just tell it that, okay, if I don't act according to your compulsion, I may lose something that you're telling me. I'll lose this person, I'll lose money, I'll lose whatever. But if I act according to your compulsion, I'll lose something far greater. I'll lose the real treasure I was born to discover. And I'm going to be intelligent. I'm not going to sacrifice the more for the less. That's not intelligent. So then we go to the last screen share.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, so what we call our journey is basically the soul's journey.
Yeah,
So
Parag.
is the soul already complete, or is it also work in progress like us?
So
I mean,
last time we touched upon this. The soul, according to Sri Aurobindo, has two components. The Jivatma, which is overhead, that is static. It doesn't change. And the Chaitya Purush, or the psychic being inside our heart space, that is the part of the soul which evolves. Evolves meaning has the capacity to manifest on the earth plane more and more. In essence, the soul is complete, but its manifestation in matter is far from complete and perfect, right? And matter is also a density of the soul. Sri Aurobindo uses that term in Savitri, that all matter is a density of the soul. So the journey of the soul is to manifest as more and more perfect forms of matter in the earth plane.
Okay.
So I have questions. So is the psychic being same as Purusha and Prakriti, or is it different?
See, lots of you have been messaging me and asking me that question from last time. I'm sorry, even I'm exploring it for myself. So I can't pretend to give you an absolute answer. But in Savitri, he has written the two who are one and play in many worlds. So in that sense, I could be wrong, but this is just my thinking that the psychic being, since it evolves, evolution is only possible in the plane of Prakriti. But it's the higher Prakriti, it's the Para Prakriti of the Adi Shakti, which is in the psychic being. And of course, it will have a Purusha component, because when you touch the psychic being, witnessing becomes very natural. So this is just my answer. I'm also exploring this.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Ma'am, this Sanjan.
Yeah.
Ma'am, what about the world that we see? When it is said it's mithya, it's an illusion. The context of what we are saying, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. It means
So Sri Aurobindo has never agreed that the world is an illusion. He says the world is a body of God, but he says in Savitri, he writes beautifully, what you see is true, but your sight is untrue. Everything is a realm of the mother, but you're not seeing mother. You're seeing Sarla, Anahita. You're seeing people where there is only God. So the world is not an illusion, it exists, but our vision of it is false. The mithya is in our vision, not in Jagat. So Sri Aurobindo wouldn't 100% agree with Jagat mithya. He would say your vision of Jagat is mithya.
So it doesn't mean it's just a projection that the mind has made, and
No,
therefore
it is real. It's the body of God. Sri Aurobindo says that again and again, that everything is God. Your thought, your body, your sensations, everything is God. So you can't call it an illusion. But in our ignorance, we see the rope as a snake. So what is seen is true, but the sight is untrue.
So, ma'am, are we seeing the two people who are having the experience? So
What?
the
Could be
people
you
who
broke off?
can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
So when two people are having an experience, A and B, A and B are both mother. But when we are observing the experience, do A and B exist at all in this? I mean, they are mother, but they do have a form, right?
They have a form. But the concept of, For example, both of us are interacting. Now, both of us may not be enlightened beings. So in our ignorance, I have a mental construct of Purvi in my mind. You have a mental construct of Anahita in your mind. But the actual Anahita that exists here is completely different from the construct you have in your mind. And the actual Purvi that exists there is completely different from the construct I have here in my mind.
And it could also be that the construct that Purvi has of herself is also completely different from what...
Not also be, it is the truth. Your biggest lie to yourself is your construct of yourself. You are not what you think you are.
Right, right. Thank you.
Welcome. So we end with Savitri. So Anjan, Sri Aurobindo loves you very much. Every time you ask a question, my next screen share answers your question. So, yet something was there behind the fading scene. The fading scene is Jagat because it's constantly changing. So he's saying it doesn't not exist. Something is there behind the fading scene. Wherever she turned, she is Savitri. This is a canto in which she's attained Nirvana. She has broken the identification of Purusha and Prakriti, and this is what she's experiencing. So yet something was there behind the fading scene. Wherever she turned, at whatsoever she looked, it was perceived. What was perceived? That something, that God presence was perceived, yet hid from mind and sight. So there was the fading scene of the world of Jagat, and wherever she turned, whatsoever she looked, it was perceived. Behind this fading scene, there was that something. You remember we mentioned that song, Zara Samne To Aaja Chaliye? So here where he's come in front, behind all form, she can sense that presence. It was perceived, yet hid from mind and sight. The one only real shut itself from space and stood aloof from the idea of time. Its truth escaped from shape and line and hue. The truth of that God consciousness, that deathless rose, which we spoke about in previous classes, escaped from shape and line and hue. All else grew unsubstantial, self-annulled. Now she had the vision to see that all this as different persons, as separate things don't exist. This only everlasting seemed untrue. So the million bodies began to be dim, and the one, the million-bodied one, in our ignorant vision, we see only the million bodies. But an enlightened vision, the million bodies aren't as significant as the one who shines through them. They are one. All else grew unsubstantial, self-annulled. This only everlasting seemed untrue. Yet nowhere dwelt. It was outside the hours. This only could justify the labor of sight. But sight could not define for it a form. Just in that state, Savitri, labor of sight means the effort to see. Her only effort to see was to see that one in all things. But that one could not be caught in a single form. This only could appease the unsatisfied ear. The ear, hearing the sounds of the world, remain unsatisfied, but that presence behind each sound, when that was heard, it could appease the unsatisfied ear. But hearing listened in vain for a missing sound. This answered not the sense. It was in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo uses a phrase, a fourth dimension of an aesthetic sense. Our five senses work in the three dimensions, but our spirit works in a fourth dimension of aesthetic sense. Our spirit senses what our five senses cannot. So this answered not the physical senses. It could not be caught by the physical senses, called not to mind. It could not be thought of with thought. It met her as the uncaught, inaudible voice that speaks forever from the unknowable, the unuttered word. That's the inaudible voice. The spirit's voice is the unuttered word, the inaudible voice. It met her as the uncaught, inaudible voice that speaks forever from the unknowable. It met her like an omnipresent point, a point which is present everywhere. So this God presence, a point is one point, no? But it's that one point which is present everywhere. Just like in quantum physics, they are exploring the principle that it looks like the world is made up of million zillion atoms, but actually there's just one atom which we are having the illusion of it being many. So pure, it met her like an omnipresent point, one point which is there everywhere in the universe. Pure, just reflect on this omnipresent point. One point which is present everywhere, the same point, not a same point which is duplicating itself in different geographical locations, but one point which at the same time is present everywhere. Just be quiet and contemplate this. The million-bodied one, the one point which is simultaneously present everywhere. It met her like an omnipresent point, pure of dimensions, unfixed, invisible, the single oneness of its multiplied beat, accentuating its soul eternity. So I'll read this passage through without explanation. Just let it speak to you. Yet something was there behind the fading scene. Wherever she turned, at whatsoever she looked, it was perceived, yet hid from mind and sight. The one only real shut itself from space and stood aloof from the idea of time. Its truth escaped from shape and line and hue. All else grew unsubstantial, self-annulled. This only everlasting seemed untrue, yet nowhere dwelt. It was outside the hours. This only could justify the labor of sight, but sight could not define for it a form. This only could appease the unsatisfied ear, but hearing listened in vain for a missing sound. This answered not the sense, called not to mind. It met her as an uncaught, inaudible voice that speaks forever from the unknowable. It met her like an omnipresent point, pure of dimensions, unfixed, invisible, the single oneness of its multiplied beat, accentuating its soul reality. So if there are no more questions, we can sit for the last summing up. If there are questions, then ask them now. Okay, so let's sum up. Sit tall with your eyes shut. We started by speaking about the two aspects in us, Purusha, the awareness, the witnessing presence, and Prakriti, the movement of thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And when we are identified with Prakriti, we live identified with the dream fact I, the ego I, which is nothing but a mental construct in our head. And the only thing in us that can ever hurt is the ego, the sense of I. But we explored how this I, being a mental construct, has no ontological reality. It's a phantom. And a phantom appears to hurt, but cannot actually hurt. So whenever I'm feeling very hurt by the behavior of another, I can remember that this person is a mental construct in my head, a phantom. I too am a mental construct in my head, a phantom. Beyond these mental constructs, both him and me, are one realm of God consciousness of the mother, playing with itself. So we did this poem. Hurt not if the arms of this fickle world withdraw. Other arms await you, unseen arms of love that never judge, arms that are waiting just one turn of attention away. So when we are hurting, if we turn our attention away from the hurt to the substrate peace behind the hurt or the mother's presence, we find those other arms that are always awaiting us. So the key to our freedom is to find in our living experience this thing in us which exists beyond thought. When we are caught in the world of thoughts, we think we are only the thoughts. But to look for that substrate peace, that awareness that we truly are beyond and behind thoughts. In terms of bhakti, there's a beautiful Hindi song which the devotee is telling Lord Krishna, Zara samne to aja chaliye, one who cheats me, come before me. Chup chup ke chalne mein kya baat hai? Why? What is the point in deceiving me from behind your veil? Tu chup na sakega Paramatma, you won't be able to hide from me. Meri Atma ki ye awaaz hai. This is the aspiration, the call of my soul. You will have to drop your veil and be seen by me. So every time I'm caught up in thought, let me look for that which is behind thought, beyond it, and recognize that to be what I truly am. As Nisargadatta Maharaj says, it has nothing to do with effort. Just turn away. Look between the thoughts rather than at the thoughts. When you happen to walk in a crowd, you do not fight every person you meet. You just find your way between. When you fight, you invite a fight. But when you do not resist, you meet with no resistance. When you refuse to play the game, you are out of it. So when thoughts trouble you, don't fight the thoughts. Just like you won't fight the crowds on a road, you'll find your way between them. Find what's between thoughts, beyond thoughts, and identify yourself with that. And when you identify yourself with that, you find that something is present everywhere. It's that same awareness which is present in all things. And this is the whole which works through every part. So said in the Gita, where Krishna tells Arjun that every creature finally executes my will mounted on the machinery of Maya. So in all interactions, avoid personalizations. Avoid thinking this is this person's bad will or goodwill towards me, because from behind the veil, it's that one who is determining how every person interacts with every other person. It's the whole acting through the part. And when we remember this, we learn to play with the whole with a smile rather than hurting and resisting the part. So we end with this.